This is CNN Breaking News.
But first, breaking news in the case against George Zimmerman, accused now of second-degree murder in the death of Trayvon Martin. Court documents offering new information about what Zimmerman may have said on the day of Trayvon Martin's death. I'll talk with Zimmerman's new lawyer in just a few moments, but right now, CNN's David Mattingly is joining us from Sanford, Florida. Tell us about the new information, David.
Well, taking a look at the court documents that prosecutors filed telling the judge why they believe that George Zimmerman should be charged with second-degree murder, there was one very telling paragraph in here. We're going to show it to you right now. It has to do with that 911 call and what was heard from George Zimmerman as he was talking to the 911 operator. They talked about how Zimmerman made reference to the people in the neighborhood that he felt had committed crimes and gotten away, referring to them as quoting him saying, "These blanks, they always get away," and then also said, "These blanking punks." That's significant because they are saying that Zimmerman used the word punks and did not utter a racial epithet as so many people thought he did during that 911 call. So that in itself is significant. But we're also looking at today about the question about why George Zimmerman is remaining behind bars, about why bond was not set in this case so far. His attorney coming out saying that they're going to wait for an appropriate time in order for the publicity to calm down a little bit, and then there'll be a bond hearing to determine if George Zimmerman will be a free man. Other than that, there is an arraignment set for the end of May in this case. And as this was going on, afterward, both sides came out speaking to the cameras, and both sides falling on a very common theme here, standing up for the justice system, because as you know, the justice process in this case has been almost under attack almost as much as George Zimmerman himself. Listen.
He's glad the process is in place. He really does hope, as the prosecutor said, that we're given the opportunity by the media, by the community, to handle this case the way it's supposed to be handled. Full discovery, conversations, negotiations, trial if need be, motions if they're appropriate, and let the system work. It really, truly, it works. And now that we have focus on it, it's going to work even better.
Letting this system work, we just had the very first step with George Zimmerman going for his initial appearance today. He uttered 4 words the entire time. The process today took less than 3 minutes for it all to transpire. But again, this is just the beginning of what promises to be a very long legal process for George Zimmerman before he gets to a jury. Before he even gets to a trial, there's going to be a hearing possibly to invoke the stand your ground law here in Florida. So a lot of huge hurdles have to be cleared before the prosecution can actually get George Zimmerman in front of a jury. Also, the question about who's going to be paying for George Zimmerman's defense. His attorney today saying that George Zimmerman is indigent. We know that he set up a website where he was soliciting funds from the public to help pay for his living expenses while he was in hiding, also for his legal expenses. So we knew that he didn't have any money to pay for an attorney. Now his attorney saying that he is indigent, which looks like it's opening the door for the state of Florida to be paying for his defense. Wolf?
And I've been reading this affidavit of probable cause, second-degree murder, that the prosecutor has just released. And I know you've read it as well, State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. You point out the prosecutors in this case are very specific on those words that Zimmerman uttered in that 911 call. Let me read that paragraph. During the recorded call, Zimmerman made reference to people he felt had committed and gotten away with break-ins in the neighborhood. Later, while talking about Martin, Zimmerman added these, and I won't use that word, a bad word, they always get away, and also said these bad word punks. The word was punks that he used, not a derogatory word against African Americans. I guess, David, and maybe the lawyers will be able to explain this, this removes presumably the opportunity for the U.S. Justice Department to file some sort of civil rights case against George Zimmerman if he used punks as opposed to a derogatory word about African Americans.
That would appear to be the case. What the Justice Department is doing is completely separate from this. But what it does tell us is getting at the state of mind of George Zimmerman as the prosecution sees it. That's what's the basis of their second-degree murder prosecution here, is what was on his mind, what was his intent as he killed that young man that night. So what this paragraph is doing is getting at George Zimmerman's state of mind, perhaps laying the groundwork for some sort of malicious frame of mind that he had toward Trayvon Martin that night.
And, you know, it's interesting, and I'll read another line or two from this affidavit because it's interesting. When the police dispatcher on this 911 call realized that Zimmerman was pursuing Trayvon Martin, he instructed Zimmerman not to do that and that the responding officer would meet him. That's the word. Don't follow him. There would be an officer was coming and just stand by. Zimmerman, according to this affidavit, disregarded the police dispatcher and continued to follow Martin, who was trying to return to his home. That would probably be the most damning comments in this affidavit.
And remember, this is the prosecution's first step forward in telling the court why George Zimmerman should be defending himself against these charges. We haven't heard in any official form what kind of defense is going to be mounted on his behalf. We've known from previous attorneys that he's going to argue that he did not start that confrontation, but for this purposes of this document, it's the prosecution who's having the first words.
All right, David Mattingly on the scene for us. Thank you. Trayvon Martin's mother is now pulling back from a stunning remark she made earlier today that the killing of her son was, quote, an accident. Listen to this.
I believe it was an accident. I believe that it just got out of control and he couldn't turn the clock back.
Sabrina Fulton, the mother, issued a statement later saying she didn't mean to suggest that the shooting was an accident. She wrote, and I'll read it to you, "We believe that George Zimmerman stalked my son and murdered him in cold blood. The accident I was referring to was the fact that George Zimmerman and my son ever crossed paths." Let's bring in George Zimmerman's new attorney, Mark O'Mara. He's joining us on the phone right now from Orlando, Florida. First of all, what do you make about the mother backing away from her earlier comment?
You know, I only saw the initial comment once, and then I've just heard what you said. She said, I really don't want to comment on what her position is. We're just going to have to deal with it as I see more about it. I've not seen the first page of evidence yet.
Have you spoken at length with your new client yet?
Certainly, yes.
And how's he doing? What's he saying? What's the bottom line as far as his mental state? Because his former attorneys were suggesting he's in major depression.
Well, I think he's tired. I think he's stressed. I think he's frightened. You know, if you think of what he has been going through for the past number of weeks, at least the isolation caused by the publicity in this case, no matter what, he was involved in a set of circumstances in which a person lost his life, Trayvon Martin, so there's a stress level certainly that carries with it. He's facing second-degree murder charges, but I will tell you that in my conversations with him, I was able to interact with him. I think that at least now there's a process in place that he knows what the next few steps would be, and there's a certain certainty in that.
You didn't seek his ability to get bail and get out of jail today, but I assume you're going to do that at some point. Is that right?
That's correct. We have a bond motion filed.
When is that?
I believe it's going to be set at the end of next week. We're confirming that time with the judge literally as we speak. And
are you realistically hopeful that the judge will let him leave on bail?
Yes, I believe he should be out on bail. There's a schedule in Florida, a bond schedule that suggests no bond initially on a second-degree murder charge, but the judge has the right to review all the facts, and there's what we call an author proceeding or hearing where the state presents what they believe to be evidence supporting their case, and I get to contest it to a certain extent. Mr. Zimmerman's prior record or lack thereof and his stability in the community are also elements that ought to be considered. I just want him out to help me in a selfish way. I want him to be available to me so we can work together in preparing his defense, and I don't believe that he needs to be incarcerated while we're doing that.
In prison right now, in jail, is he isolated from other prisoners?
He's in what Seminole County calls protective custody, so yes, he is isolated from other prisoners.
Have you had a chance, Mark O'Mara, to read this affidavit of probable cause that the prosecutor Angela Corey has just released, State of Florida versus George Zimmerman?
Very briefly, because it was handed to me at the hearing where we were interacting with the judge.
One of the lines saying the police dispatcher informed Zimmerman that an officer was on the way and to wait for the officer. I guess the bottom line question is, why did he disrespect that request from the 911 police dispatcher and continue following Trayvon Martin?
I have no idea the timeline. I don't have the evidence yet or the discovery, so it would really be proper for me to comment on what I don't know yet.
And this other line, I'll read it to you. Maybe you don't want to comment on this one either, but I'll read it to you anyhow. When the police dispatcher realized Zimmerman was pursuing Martin, he instructed Zimmerman not to do that and that the responding officer would meet him. Zimmerman disregarded the police dispatcher and continued to follow Martin, who was trying to return to his home. That would seem to be very damning evidence against your client that he was willfully going after this 17-year-old boy.
Well, I'm not sure that, who signed the affidavit and what information that they looked at to come to that conclusion. But what I would like to do is get to that evidence in sum, not just a summary of it, but all of the evidence, timeline it, and see. I know that there were other sort of misinterpretations of the evidence along the way, so I'd rather wait until we have it before adding to those misinterpretations.
The two investigators who signed this affidavit are T.C. Osteen and Dale Gilbraith. They're both identified as investigators. I assume that would mean police investigators who are on the scene, right?
I don't know, on the scene or reviewing it. The investigators may well have been the ones reviewing all the information. I truly don't know.
All right, Mark O'Mara, we'll stay in close touch with you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Sure thing.